All eyes on G7 summit in Canada. On agenda, war, trade and tech. Modi Carney signal thaw in ties. World leaders vary of Trump's antics. First Modi, Trump meet post-mediation claim. In a world at war, can the best unite? That is our top focus on Newstrack.
Hello and welcome to an India Today special broadcast that comes to you from Calgary in Canada. I'm Gaurav Sawant. Several world leaders have started arriving here in Calgary for the G7 summit that will take place in the Rocky Mountains in Canonicus area of Calgary. Now, those are the beautiful mountains and lakes. It's at a higher altitude, much colder than what Calgary is. Calgary is usually between 6 degrees to 8 degrees at night, about 15 during day. In summers goes to minus 40, but tensions are rising and how when it comes to the Israel-Iran conflict. And in the Israel-Iran conflict, the escalations that's taken place very recently. Over the course of the next 1 hour, we get you much more on this special broadcast. But first, as always, the headlines on the news track at 10. After Iran strikes on Tel Aviv and Haifa, Israel asks Iranian citizens to evacuate. Tehran threatens to leave the nuclear weapons treaty. Russian President Vladimir Putin tells US counterpart Donald Trump ready to resume peace talks. Zelensky keeps saying next step only after prisoner swap completed. Prime Minister Narendra Modi leaves for Canada to attend the G7 summit after concluding the Cyprus leg of his three-nation tour focused on trade and peace talks. First Trump-Modi face-to-face meeting after Operation Sindoor ceasefire credit war. Cockpit voice recorder recovered from Air India crash site in Ahmedabad. Radio transmissions and conversations between the pilot and of course the engine noises to be examined by probe agencies. Government sets the ball rolling on census cast survey in census 2027. Politics escalates. Congress asks is census another jumla. BJP hits out at the Congress over hushing up of the 2011 caste census data. Our top focus story on this special broadcast is a statement that's coming in from US President Donald Trump here in Canada. President Trump has made it very clear the United States stands with Israel. He said, and I quote, "We have always supported Israel." Now, this is President Trump's first summit remarks at G7. He slammed not just Justin Trudeau, the earlier Prime Minister of Canada, but also Barack Obama, the earlier President of the United States, for throwing out Russia from G7. Remember, G7 used to be G8 earlier between 2014 when Russia, of course, was thrown out. Donald Trump has said Iranians want to talk about de-escalation. Iran is not winning this war. They should talk before it's too late. That's that big point US President Donald Trump is making. Remember, G7 is a very powerful body of the 7 strongest economies in the world. But Donald Trump says it It should have been G8. It was wrong on the part of leaders like Justin Trudeau and Barack Obama to have thrown Russia out on the issue of the Ukraine war at that point of time, the operations that were going on in Crimea. I'll tell you more about it, but before I get you more on the story, let's listen in to US President Donald Trump here in Canada at G7.
They'd like to talk, but they should have done that before. I had 60 days and they had 60 days, and on the 61st day I said, we don't have a deal. They have to make a deal, and it's painful for both parties, but I'd say Iran is not winning this war, and they should talk, and they should talk immediately before it's too late.
And I quickly want to cut across to India Today's Pranay Upadhyay for more on this big story. Pranay, that's a big statement that's coming in from the US president. So let's break it down in two parts. One, very strongly stand with Israel, and that's obvious. Two, it should have been G8 and not G7. Wrong on the part of Obama and Trudeau to have thrown Russia out. Now, that's a big statement at a time when he's already in touch with the Russian president on the Russia-Ukraine war.
Absolutely, Gaurav, but since you have also covered the previous tenure of President Donald Trump between 2016 to 2020, you would recall, Gaurav, that this has been his consistent position because Russia was thrown out of G8 post-Crimea incident in 2013-14, and President Donald Trump, at that time also, he said that it was a wrong decision to throw out Putin because he thinks that, with the isolating Putin, isolating Russia will not going to solve the problem. Even in this presidency, he has maintained this thing. As far as the Iran-Israel conflict is concerned, on that count as well, President Donald Trump and the US president's position is quite clear as far as siding with Israel is concerned. But there's a very significant statement which has just now come in. That is from the Iranian Foreign Minister Syed Abbas Araghchi, and he said he has accused Israel and the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. But on the other side, this Abbas Araghchi has clearly said that it needs only one phone call from Washington, D.C. to Benjamin Netanyahu, and we can go back to the path, we can go back to the table of diplomacy. So this is a very clear indication from Iranian side as well that Iran is willing to engage with United States on diplomacy, but provided a situation comes to that point by the cessation of missile strike, by the cessation of airstrike by Israel. So there is something which is going on in back-channel diplomacy. Also, President Putin speaking to President Donald Trump, President Putin speaking to Masoud Pezeshkian, who's president of Iran. So there is clearly some diplomacy happening. Prime Minister Narendra Modi is also reaching there in Canada, Gaurav, and you would be tracking more developments from there.
Okay, I'll come back to you for more. Prime Minister Narendra Modi is en route Canada right now. He had a very successful visit to Cyprus. Not only is it very important from people to people and government to government and country to country relationship, but it also has a wider geopolitical and strategic implication. Remember, it was then Prime Minister late Indira Gandhi who had visited Cyprus in 1982, and then Atal Bihari Vajpayee in 2002, and then Narendra Modi in 2025, a country that plays a very significant role. India's visits, while the country, India and Cyprus have been very close, but the Prime Minister's visit is likely to add new impetus to these ties, and especially at a time when Turkey has been openly hostile to India, openly supported Pakistan's state-sponsored radical Islamist terror, not just in terms of selling military hardware, but also Turkish operatives, drone operatives being on ground targeting India, something that India hasn't taken very kindly to. But India-Cyprus relations, Prime Minister Narendra Modi being awarded the highest civilian award of Cyprus, which he said is on behalf of 140 crore Indians. But what does this mean for the relationship between the two countries and that region where India has more partners now to take on hostile forces?
Prime Minister Modi is on his way to Canada to attend the G7 summit, where top global leaders will discuss the world's most pressing issues: the Israel-Iran war, trade, and more. This marks Narendra Modi's first visit to Canada since diplomatic relations between New Delhi and Ottawa turned frosty over the killing of Khalistani separatist Hardeep Singh Nijjar.
In this particular G7, India will be speaking about energy security, innovation, new technologies like AI, quantum, etc., which are contemporary topics which affect all of us, and our views will definitely be noticed, I'm sure.
The Indian diaspora in Canada is awaiting the Prime Minister's arrival.
It indicates the power which India is emerging to be. Being a developing country, it has definitely left its mark on the entire world stage, and Modi is a born leader, and he's already proved his mettle again and again, year after year, term after term. So yeah, it would not be a complete G7 without Modi ji.
Modi ji coming to Canada is a big move, and they can build a relationship with which Indian students can grow more and develop themselves. And I believe that that can happen, and that's what I hope for.
The G7 is an informal grouping of the world's most industrialized economies. France, Germany, Italy, the United Kingdom, Japan, the United States and Canada. Representatives from the European Union, the IMF, the World Bank and the United Nations also participate. While India is not a member of the G7, New Delhi has been consistently invited to attend the grouping's meetings since 2019.
If the new government in Canada wants to extend a hand of friendship to India, India will respond, because we have linkages with Canada, which are several, people to people, economic. Exactly. Diaspora, education, economic, health, energy, natural resources.
The G7 invite reflects India's growing importance to the world. Canadian Prime Minister made it clear that the summit wouldn't be complete without the participation of the fifth largest economy in the world.
India, the fifth largest economy in the world, effectively the most populous country in the world, central to a number of those supply chains, at the heart of a number of those supply chains, so it makes sense. And in addition, bilaterally, we have now agreed, importantly, to continued law enforcement dialogue. So there's been some progress on that. It recognizes issues of accountability. I extended the invitation to Prime Minister Modi in that context, and he has accepted.
The other 6 members of the G7 are also interested in deepening their strategic partnerships with India. The Prime Minister's G7 participation comes at a time of great geopolitical flux and divisions within the G7 itself. The Prime Minister's presence at the G7 summit reflects India's pivotal role in shaping the global agenda. With Gaurav Sawant in Calgary, Bureau Report, India Today.
And big story that's coming in the West is a divided bloc on G7. You have America and several European countries not on the same page, whether it's on the Israel-Iran conflict, whether you have the Russia-Ukraine conflict, or even the Indo-Pacific region. With Donald Trump back at the White House, Russia is a country which America wants back in G7 to be G8 once again. But how does this war between Israel and Iran end? The US strongly stands with Israel. You have European countries who want Israel to dial down on tensions and on escalation and use the road of dialogue. Will that really happen? But that's not the only issue. Again, on cooperation and economy and investments. Now look at America. America wants America first. G7 is all about economic cooperation. Donald Trump insists on Make in America. What then happens to the European countries? What happens to China? What happens to supply chains? All of those are issues which will be thrashed. But again, there is no joint communique that will come out. There will just be a summary of the discussions that have taken place, and this just shows how they're not on the same page. That's very clear. So whether it's on trade, technology, climate and security, rift over Russia-Ukraine war, West Asia conflict, Trump's return shifts the focus once again. US tariffs, defense, budget demands, how much, what percent of GDP needs to be spent. These are all issues where the countries, G7 partners, are not on the same page. So Mark Carney, the Canadian Prime Minister, said there will be a summary note, no joint communique. Lots of reactions coming in. Let's listen in.
Barack Obama and a person named Trudeau didn't want to have Russia in. And I would say that that was a mistake, because I think you wouldn't have a war right now if you had Russia in. And you wouldn't have a war right now if Trump were president 4 years ago. But it didn't work out that way. But it used to be the G8, and now it's, I guess, what's that, 9 years ago, 8 years ago, it switched over. They threw Russia out, which I claimed was a very big mistake. Even though I wasn't in politics then, I was very loud about it. It was a mistake in that. Well, it's not a bad idea. I don't mind that. If somebody wants to suggest China coming in, I think we suggest. But you want to have people that you can talk to. You know, they don't talk to. Putin speaks to me. He doesn't speak to anybody else. He doesn't want to talk, because he was very insulted when he got thrown out of the G8. As I would be, as you would be, as anybody would be. He was very insulted. And, I mean, he was thrown out by Trudeau, who convinced one or two people, along with Obama. He was thrown out, and he's not a happy person about it, I can tell you.
And in G7, 7 powerful economies, but when you have President Donald Trump, who insists on America first, when you have powerful European countries that want a different end to the Russia-Ukraine war, the American president wants a different ending to the Russia-Ukraine war. Clearly, is this now becoming a dialogue of the deaf? What's the way forward? What role do countries like India, seen as a very powerful rising economy, growing economy, the 5th largest, on our way to being the 4th. Some argue we already are the 4th, on our way in the next couple of years to be the 3rd largest economy. What role do countries like India play, especially when it comes to supply chain management? Very important aspect, the use of technology, from quantum computing to the use of technology to benefit masses, India's digital benefit transfer, artificial intelligence, how can all of that benefit the world? That's something that India would be bringing to the table. I get you more in this report.
As Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney makes his G7 debut, the stakes are high. The summit comes amid the ongoing Ukraine-Russia war, rising tensions in West Asia, and growing global economic uncertainty, all magnified by the unpredictable presence of US President Donald Trump. Trump's stance on major conflicts from Ukraine to Iran and Russia has America's long-standing allies worried. His past conduct hasn't helped. In 2018, he had stormed out of the G7 in Quebec and refused to sign the joint communique over tariff disputes. Moreover, he did not attend any further G7 summits after 2019. And due to the COVID-19 pandemic, he made no international trips between February 2020 and the end of his presidency. Tensions between world leaders and Trump has only intensified in recent months. With steep US tariffs still in place, including 25% on Canadian autos and 50% on steel and aluminium. With Canada's retaliatory measures in effect, economic friction is once again front and center. The summit will also mark Trump and Prime Minister Modi's first meeting since the India-Pakistan ceasefire. a truce Trump has repeatedly claimed credit for brokering. To keep things on track, Canada has scrapped the joint communique and opted for shorter, focused sessions and private talks. This year's G7 is more than a summit. It's a test of whether traditional alliances can withstand the unpredictability of Donald Trump. Bureau Report, India Today.
Now, India will be playing a pivotal role in the G7 outreach program. Remember, India is not a part of the G7, but there are several countries that have now been campaigning for a G10, or as many argue, a D10, or the 10 most powerful democracies in the world, which are powerful economies. Now, democracies shaping a multipolar world. That is India's key focus area, key result area. Instead of an individual, it should be, or a country, it should be a group of countries, that shape the course. Supply chain management, that's very important. Now there's new leadership coming in several countries, and this would be Prime Minister Narendra Modi's first interaction with several of those leaderships. Remember, Narendra Modi is now amongst the senior most world leaders, having won 3 elections back to back. 2014 to 19, 19 to 24, and 24 onwards. Whereas you have US President Donald Trump, who's come in, but after a gap, you have several other leaders who've done either one tenure or some in their second tenure, but nobody in their third tenure in terms of powerful democracies across the world. That's the kind of heft and experience that India also brings to this table. Prime Minister Narendra Modi brings to the table. Also the fact that India is a very powerful democracy and a rising economy, the world's fastest growing large economy, a country that yet gives direct benefit transfer to 800 million people, more than the population of several countries in Europe, and that's something that's discussed very extensively in these countries. That how is India emerging as that growth engine? And I want to bring in Pranay Upadhyay for more on this. And Pranay, that's where India's role in G7, even though we are not a part of G7, becomes very critical, and perhaps something new may just emerge. Pranay, what do we expect?
Gaurav, you rightly pointed out, if you see the composition of G7 countries, which is considered as the developed economies grouping, out of these developed economies, India is a better economy. India is a bigger economy as compared to 4 other member countries of the G7 grouping, be it France, be it Italy, be it Canada, or even Japan. We are at par with Japan. So this clearly shows that what India brings to the table on the G7 platform. So this clearly shows the strength of India's outreach, and that's why since 2002, 2003 onwards, India has consistently received the outreach invitation by every country which has hosted the G7 grouping. This is the economic importance of India. But India also comes with a unique depth, which is the diplomatic depth here. Because this summit is happening at a time when the world is reeling through intense escalation of conflicts. But be it Russia-Ukraine conflict, India enjoys good relationship with both Russia and Ukraine. India enjoys good relation with Israel and Iran. And India has also offered that if the need arises, we are ready. We stand by to help either parties to reach a diplomacy and a peace solution, a negotiation. If they want to come to table, we are there to help them out. So this clearly shows. And in fact, if you mentioned about President Donald Trump. President Donald Trump is considered as a great disruptor as far as the established orders are concerned. But in the 51st G7 summit, there are already talks about the expansion plans to have more relevant partners. People have already propped up the idea of inclusion of China. But if China need to be included, why not India? India comes with a very good credentials, being a democracy, being an emerging economic superpower, and also the most populous country on the planet. So therefore, India comes with a unique experience and unique strength as far as the G7 is concerned.
Very important point you bring here, Pranay, for joining me here on this India Today special broadcast. For the moment, Pranay Upadhyay, many thanks. Now, what's also very critical as part of Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit, he will be here in a couple of hours from now for that all-important summit tomorrow, would be his series of bilateral meetings. And he has several bilaterals that are lined up. There's one that's anticipated with the Prime Minister of Canada, Mark Carney. India-Canada relations, they went downhill when Justin Trudeau was at the helm of affairs. And it just kept going downhill despite India's best efforts to ensure that the relationship does not get impacted by Trudeau getting the support of the Khalistani elements. But now there is cautious optimism. Canada has invested more than $75 billion of their pension funds in the Indian markets because India is a very stable market. But the potential of this relationship is much more. Will this relationship realize its true potential under Mark Carney and Narendra Modi? Will there be action against the Khalistani elements? There's already conversation about intelligence cooperation and police cooperation between the two countries. What does that mean? I get you more in this report as I slip into a quick break. Lots more coming up on the other side of this report and a break on India Today with Gaurav Sawant. Stay with us.
The stage is set for the 2025 G7 summit, one of the most anticipated diplomatic gatherings of the year. But for India and Canada, it signals the first high-level engagement between the two nations since ties soured in 2023, and is also Prime Minister Modi's first visit to Canada since 2015. With Mark Carney now at the helm of affairs as Canada's new Prime Minister, there is renewed hope for a diplomatic reset. Mark Carney has highlighted India's growing global influence, stating that it is impossible to address major challenges, whether it be energy security, climate change, or AI, without India at the table. Despite strained diplomatic ties, economic relations between India and Canada remain strong. India is Ottawa's 10th largest trading partner, with bilateral goods trade nearing $10 billion in 2024. India exported nearly $6 billion worth of goods to Canada, while imports totaled around $4 billion in 2024. Even as both nations try to normalize diplomatic relations. India's key demand from Canada remains stronger action against pro-Khalistan extremists operating on its soil. It will also be looking to put to rest allegations made by the Trudeau government regarding the death of Khalistani terrorist Hardeep Singh Nijjar. New Delhi also seeks to resolve persistent visa delays and ensure smoother mobility for Indian students and professionals that have been impacted since 2023. India will advocate for mutual recognition of academic and professional qualifications, aiming to enhance talent exchange and economic cooperation. Could this be the breakthrough movement India and Canada have waited for? Bureau Report, India Today.